I'd like, if I may, to set a scene for you. One of your fellow students has made an appointment to speak to me about an assignment. Maybe it's an assignment they've already written, maybe it's an assignment that they're working on. Either way, a few minutes before the meeting starts, I'll compose myself. I'll find a good stopping point for whatever project I'm working on. I'll check my email to make sure that there's not a last-minute cancellation or change of plans. And if the student is a few minutes late, I'll probably check social media, because I'm an addict, like so many of you probably are as well. This is my ritual. This is what I need to do in order to be sure that I can focus all of my attention on the needs of the student who, in happier times, would be coming through my office door, but here in the pandemic, will probably be about to zoom in. And what happens next is another ritual, utterly predictable. The student and I will exchange some pleasantries. It's good to break the ice. But then, after a few seconds of that, and maybe a minute or two, it's down to business. Now, how do I know when it's time to get down to business? Well, that's really simple. I know it's time to get down to business when the apologies begin and the self-denigrating language starts. I'm sorry to bother you. I know you're busy, but I'm a worthless slug unworthy of your time. Okay, that last one I just made up, and yeah, it's an exaggeration, but sadly, I think it's not too far from the mark of how many of you feel about approaching your professors. And I get it. I won't for a minute pretend that you all haven't had that experience of a professor, or probably professors, making you feel like you're a burden on their time, that you were the lowest on their priority list, that you're an abject failure for not getting it from their brilliant lectures in class, or from just reading on your own. We've all had professors like that, and it's shameful. But that shame doesn't belong to you. That shame belongs to the professors who made you feel that way, and for, frankly, an academy that, if it doesn't encourage those behaviors, it doesn't seem to really discourage them either. So once we kind of get that denigrating language out of the self-denigrating language out of the way, the student and I come to that really, really tense moment in the meeting. We've both known it's coming. From the moment we first said hello, we've done what we can do to delay the moment, but here it is. We might try to ease into it, but it's still going to feel really awkward because it's time for me to read the draft. At this point, emotions are running high. At this moment, the student is feeling incredibly vulnerable. All their perceived imperfections are laid bare in front of a person who will ultimately be judging them. It's a fraught moment, and it's made worse because to read the draft, I have to stop talking, and awkward silences beg to be filled in. So now raw impulses overtake the student, compelling them to confess that they know that their draft is riddled with mistakes, that they're ashamed to have brought such an imperfect mess into my office, that they hope to have a better draft ready for the meeting, but, they had a test the day before, or they had to work all morning, or their pet was sick all last night. In other words, they're begging that I don't judge them as people based on the quality of the draft they brought to my office. And anyway, they almost always say, and anyway, I have always sucked at writing. Does this sound at all familiar? Well, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. You probably do suck at writing. Now, hold on, don't leave. Let me explain first, please. First, this isn't an absolute truth, right? Many of the students who come through my doors are actually gifted writers. Most of the time, though, that gift isn't the result of random luck. Contrary to popular belief, great writers aren't born. There is no writing fairy out there who bestows magnificent writing ability on babies at birth with the wave of a magic wand. Yes, there are some people who learn to write more easily than others. Some of that is probably due to quirks in cognitive development. But much more of it has to do with environmental factors, such as access to reading at a young age, family encouragement, quality instruction, and practice. So much practice. Second, so what if you have always sucked at writing? It's not a moral failing. Indeed, it's not even a bad thing. And importantly, it's not an absolute thing. Sucking at writing in the past doesn't mean you can't suck less in the future. Indeed, it doesn't mean you can't even become a great writer at some point in the future. I know, you don't believe me, right? Well, consider some of the other things you have seriously sucked at in the past. At one time, you really sucked at walking. I mean, you couldn't even stand up properly. You'd kind of slowly raise yourself up using your hands to hold onto anything to steady yourself. You'd then just pathetically stand there for a few seconds, tottering back and forth until you fell on your butt. I mean, come on. Even once you finally mastered standing, it took months before you attempted your first steps. And you couldn't even do that properly. You just sort of awkwardly teeter in the direction you wanted to move and hope your legs would keep up to your upper body and that oversized head of yours, which it almost never did, so you landed on your butt again. Indeed, it took you ages before you could learn to walk properly, let alone run or jump or skip. Somehow, though, that didn't stop you. You weren't even a little bit ashamed for not having that whole bipedal locomotion thing nailed down. You absolutely placed no moral attachment to how many times you've stumbled and fell. Not convinced yet? Well, okay, how about this? You know what else you sucked at? Talking. My God, you babbled on incoherently for years before anyone could understand you, and even then it was only your parents. And, I mean, your vocabulary was pathetic. Your grammar was practically non-existent. Hell, no one outside your family could really carry on a conversation with you until you were, 5 years old, maybe? And it was probably another 5 years before you had much that was interesting to say. You pathetic loser. It's a wonder you didn't die from the shame of it all. I could go on, but hopefully I've made the point. Yes, you may actually suck at writing right now, but that shouldn't stop you from putting yourself out there and giving it hell with the same wild abandon that you learned all the other skills you take for granted now. Yeah, I know that's easier said than done, and writing provokes a special kind of anxiety for a few reasons. First, writing seems like an extension of talking, and in some ways it is. However, it's a very peculiar way of talking, using language in ways that are quite different from how we learn to speak. First, writing brings with it all sorts of added baggage that speaking doesn't. You know, things like spelling, and punctuation, and paragraphs, and bulleted lists, and subheadings, and, well, you get the idea. And all of that baggage comes with rules that aren't at all intuitive, and they're really rules that only make sense if you reflect on your language in a way that is completely unnatural. Even worse, just when you think you have all the rules down, they seem to change. And that's because they aren't really rules at all. Rather, they're conventions, and those conventions change depending on context. The conventions for texting your friends are very different from the conventions for writing a novel. Both are radically different from the conventions of formal scientific writing. And let's talk about those rules for a minute. The rules of standard written English, or standard written any language for that matter, were set by privileged classes. They codify a dialect used by a subset of the population, and that subset is usually the wealthy ruling classes. And those rules or conventions are much slower to change than the rules of spoken language. So there's no objective reason why ain't isn't a perfectly legitimate verb. There's no reason y'all isn't a perfectly legitimate pronoun. These are wrong in standard written English simply because people who decided the rules considered them low class. And one powerful tool for protecting your station in life is to make it harder for those beneath you. And one way to make it harder is to have other people have to jump through more hoops in order to become educated so that they can qualify for the jobs and positions that your friends and family have. So, yeah, you've been speaking for quite a few years now, but just because you can speak with ease doesn't mean you should automatically be able to write with the same skill. Why? Well, because you simply haven't had the practice. Sure, you started to learn to write in kindergarten, and you've had to write for lots of classes since then. Moreover, when you consider things like texting and social media, your generation uses writing probably more than any generation that's come before. So why in the world do you still suck at writing? Well, for the same reason that sprinters make lousy marathon runners. For the same reason that piano players aren't automatically good at the guitar. For the same reason that photographers can't automatically pick up a paintbrush and create masterpieces. You become good at what you practice, and you have spent far more hours each week of your life speaking than you did writing. And most of the writing you do day to day follows very different conventions from the writing expected in, say, a research paper or a news article or a short story or a novel or a poem. I'm okay with that. In fact, it's the whole reason I have a job. I am not paid to validate good writers. I'm paid to help people get better at this vital life skill. Look, I know me saying all of this won't automatically make you feel less vulnerable when you bring rough drafts into my office. Nothing I can say will make sitting in silence while a professor reads your draft in front of you less awkward or less anxiety-provoking. Believe it or not, I still get those same butterflies in my stomach when I have peers read my work or when I send manuscripts off to editors. Rather, what I hope you take away from this is that it's okay not to be good at something. If you sat down for 10 minutes and made a list of all the things you're not good at, you'd realize that writing is just one drop of a very large bucket. If you're not ashamed that you aren't good at underwater welding or Mongolian wrestling, then why should you feel shame about any other skill you haven't had the chance yet to master? How would you get better at sculpting? You'd practice. How would you get better at weightlifting? You'd practice. How would you get better at playing a musical instrument? You'd practice. And you know what? For a long time, you'd suck at all of those activities too. But you'd get better. You'd get better by trying and failing and trying again. You get better by consulting more experienced people, people with an objective eye who could help pinpoint why you weren't achieving the goals you wanted and how you can fix those issues so you can progress. Writing is absolutely no different. When you ask me to read a draft, I'm expecting it to be rough around the edges. I'm expecting it to have flaws. And here's the kicker, I have those same expectations when I read your final drafts. I do not expect or demand perfection. No one, including myself, could live up to that. So when I give your assignment anything less than a perfect grade, I am not saying that you are a terrible person. I am not saying that you're lazy or incompetent. I am not saying that you have no place in your chosen profession. All I'm saying is that this assignment, whatever it is, has revealed some areas that need further refinement, further practice in order for you to improve your writing skills. That's not a moral judgment. It's just an observation, and it is always made with the intention of helping you to move closer to your professional goals. And it is one of my greatest honors in life that I'm allowed to be a part of the professional journey of so many wonderful students. So yeah, you probably suck at writing right now, so what? Be proud of yourself for putting yourself out there. Revel in your imperfections. Be the toddler you once were, unafraid of falling on your butt. Before you know it, you'll be walking, skipping, and jumping and running. So remember, in all things, be gentle with yourselves and kind to one another. Thanks for watching.